Welcome back to Concrete Conversations, a podcast written and hosted by Texas Slab Guys. This podcast covers meaningful stories that impact the concrete industry. Today, we are talking about how Texas regulators are considering new air quality rules for concrete batch plants, a move that could significantly affect Houston neighborhoods, public health, and the future of local construction. But before we dive into that story, please hit follow and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on concrete industry news.
Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. It's a scene we have all, been part of. You are driving down the highway. Maybe it is the morning commute. You've got your coffee. You're inching along. And right next to you, taking up a lot of space, is one of those massive trucks.
The ones that rumble.
Exactly. The ones that rumble. The ones with the giant rotating drum on the back, spinning slowly, usually covered in a fine layer of gray dust.
The concrete mixer.
The concrete mixer. They are everywhere. They're basically the unofficial mascot of modern development. But here is a question I will bet you have never asked yourself while staring at that spinning drum.
Where did it just come from?
It's funny because we see the end result, the skyscraper, the highway, the sidewalk, and we see the vehicle, but the origin point, that is usually invisible to us. Right, it's just infrastructure background noise. But today, we are stopping the track. We are looking at where it came from. We are doing a deep dive into the world of concrete batch plants. And specifically, we are looking at a really significant shift happening right now in Texas regarding how these places get permission to exist.
This is a perfect topic for a deep dive because it sits right at the intersection of two things that usually clash.
Mm-hmm.
The absolute necessity of building things and the basic human need to breathe clean air.
And to guide us through this, we are looking at a report from January 1st, 2026 by Natalie Weber for Houston Public Media. And I have to say, Weber isn't just rewriting press releases here.
No, and that context is important. She has a background in investigative reporting.
Right.
She used to cover misconduct and courts for the Tampa Bay Times. She has a watchdog sensibility. So when she looks at environmental permits, she isn't just looking at the paperwork. She's looking for where the systems are breaking down and where they are creating friction with real communities.
Exactly. She's digging into the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ, and how they are currently scrambling to rewrite the rule book because of two specific state laws, Senate Bill 763 and Senate Bill 2351.
Now, I know listening to legislative bill numbers might sound like the cure for insomnia.
It usually is, yeah.
But stick with us, because these two bills are essentially rewriting the social contract between industrial sites and the neighborhoods they sit next to. This isn't just administrative code. It's about what is floating in the air outside your window.
So let's unpack this, because usually when we talk about permits and administrative code, my eyes glaze over, but you're saying this is actually a matter of life and breath.
It is. To understand why, we have to start with what a concrete batch plant actually is. It sounds industrial and complex, but the definition is, pretty simple. It's a facility where you combine cement, water, sand, and rocks. You mix it all up to create concrete.
Okay, rocks, sand, water. Sounds harmless enough. Just a big mud pie, right?
If only. The process involves moving a massive amount of fine material. And because concrete creates a chemical reaction that starts hardening immediately, you can't mix it 3 hours away.
Ah.
You have to mix it near the construction site.
So they have to be local. They have to be near the growth.
Correct. And that means they are often near people. The problem is that according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, these plants are known emitters of particulate matter. And that is the key phrase. Particulate matter.
Which, for anyone who hasn't looked at a biology textbook in a while, is bad news for your lungs.
Precisely. We aren't talking about the kind of dust you wipe off your bookshelf. We're talking about microscopic particles.
Yeah.
They are small enough to bypass your body's natural defenses, your nose hairs, your throat.
Wow.
They can penetrate deep into the respiratory system and even enter the bloodstream.
So it's not just a nuisance, it's a health vector.
It is. And the friction comes from the fact that, as we said, these plants aren't always in the middle of a desert. They're often right next to where people live, play, and go to school.
And that brings us to the human element of this story. Natalie Weber's reporting introduces us to some pretty unexpected activists. We aren't talking about lawyers in suits here. We're talking about 8th graders.
Gavin Lindley Elwell and Esteban de la Rosa.
Right. 2 middle schoolers from the Houston area. They actually went out to protest a concrete plant that was operating near the Spring Branch campus. And what struck me was how clearly they understood the stakes. They weren't just repeating slogans.
It's compelling, isn't it? You have Gavin, who says, I didn't know that people that didn't look like me or Esteban or stayed in my neighborhood had to go through having concrete batch plants in their neighborhood less than a couple miles away. He explicitly calls it dangerous.
He's realizing that his reality isn't everyone's reality.
Exactly. And then Esteban brings up this really short point about equity. He says, I don't think it's right that other people have so many concrete batch plants, but we have one, and it's not even that close to us.
Not even that close to us. He's talking about the owners, right? The people who run the plant.
He is. He's identifying the disconnect. The people who own the plant, the ones reaping the economic reward of that concrete, usually do not live in the zip code that deals with the dust.
That is the crux of the environmental justice argument right there, coming from an 8th grader.
It creates this immediate sense of unfairness. Why should these students bear the health burden for someone else's profit? Especially when you realize these kids are breathing this air during recess.
So you have this groundswell of frustration. You have 8th graders holding signs. And that pressure eventually flows up to the state capitol. Which brings us to the new rules. The TCEQ is currently in the middle of a major overhaul because of these 2 bills authored by State Senator Carol Alvarado.
Let's break them down because they attack the problem from 2 different angles. First, you have Senate Bill 763. This one's all about the timeline.
The review cycle, right?
Correct. Under the old system, reviewing the air quality permit for a concrete batch plant was, let's call it relaxed. Reviews were often optional, or they happened on a 10-year cycle.
10 years. A lot can change in a neighborhood in 10 years. I mean, think about your own neighborhood 10 years ago versus now. An empty field becomes a subdivision. A quiet street becomes a thoroughfare.
Exactly. A plant could be operating with technology or standards that are a decade old while a school is built next door, and nobody is necessarily forcing a check-in. The regulators aren't required to look at it. SB 763 changes that. It mandates that the TCEQ review these air quality permits every 8 years.
Okay, so from 10 years to 8 years, I can hear some listeners thinking, big deal, it's a 2-year difference. Why does that actually matter?
It matters because it turns a passive system into an active one. It creates a mandatory touch point.
Like a mandatory car inspection.
Exactly like that. If you know you never have to get your car inspected, maybe you let that muffler rust, maybe you ignore the check engine light. But if you know you have a hard date every 8 years where the state is going to look under the hood, you maintain compliance. It tightens the feedback loop. It prevents complacency.
Okay, I see that. It keeps them on their toes. But the second bill, Senate Bill 2351, this one has a nickname that I absolutely love.
The zombie permit killer.
Zombie permit killer. Please explain. Because now I'm picturing a concrete mixer rising from the grave.
It's not far off. So there used to be a loophole in the Texas regulations. A company could apply for a permit to build a concrete batch plant. They do the paperwork, they get approved, but then they don't build it.
They just sit on it.
They sit on it. Maybe the economy slowed down. Maybe they just wanted to lock in the land rights. So the permit sits there, gathering dust, sometimes for years.
Okay, but eventually they want to build.
Right. Let's say 5 or 6 years pass. Now they decide to build. In those 6 years, maybe the EPA has found new data on pollution. Maybe the technology for filters has gotten way better. But under the old rules, that company could grandfather themselves in.
Oh, I see where this is going.
They could build the plant using the environmental standards from when they got the permit, not the standards of today. That is the zombie permit. It's an old, dead standard coming back to life to authorize a new plant.
That feels incredibly unfair to the community. You think you're getting a new facility, but it's running on outdated logic.
It defeats the purpose of progress. I mean, if we learn that something is dangerous, we shouldn't allow new construction to ignore that knowledge just because they filed paperwork 5 years ago.
So how does SB 2351 kill the zombie?
It closes the loophole. If a plant hasn't begun construction and they ask for an extension on that permit, the commission can now require them to meet the new, stricter quality standards.
So if you want to build in 2026, you have to play by 2026 rules.
Precisely. No more hoarding permits to bypass future safety rules, and Natalie Weber notes that there is real urgency here. The TCEQ has a hard deadline to adopt the new rules for SB 763 by March 1st, 2026.
So the clock is ticking.
Right now.
Now, usually when we talk about environmental regulations, the narrative is pretty predictable. We've all seen this movie before. Advocates say these rules are too weak, they don't protect us. And industry says these rules are too strong, you're killing business. It's a tug of war.
Right. It's usually a zero-sum game.
But here is where this deep dive gets really interesting. we have a plot twist.
We do, and it's a big one.
Let's look at the advocates first. You have Genesis Granados, the Environmental Justice Manager for Air Alliance Houston. She's saying pretty much what you'd expect. They want the TCEQ to use its full authority to protect communities.
Right, and Senator Alvarado, who wrote the bills, is realistic. She's quoted as saying, "It is not completely where we want to go, but it is getting us to a better place."
Okay.
So the advocates see this as a step in the right direction, but maybe not the whole journey. They are cautiously optimistic.
But then you look at the industry. The Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association, TACA, these are the people representing the concrete plants. You would expect them to be fighting this tooth and nail, right? Screaming about red tape and burden on business.
You would, but they aren't. In fact, TACA supported the new laws during the legislative session.
That blew my mind when I read it in Weber's report. Why would the industry agree to tighter inspections and losing their zombie permits? Are they just feeling generous?
I don't think generous is the right word. I think strategic is better. It comes down to one specific concept: predictability.
Predictability.
Andrew Pinkerton is the president and CEO of TACA. He put out a statement saying that these measures preserve the standard permit system.
Okay, we need to unpack that. What is a standard permit system, and why is preserving it worth accepting more regulation?
This is the key to the whole industry strategy. In the regulatory world, a standard permit is like the express lane at the grocery store.
The express lane, I like that.
It's a streamlined, predictable mechanism. The state says, if you use this equipment, if you stay this far from the property line, if you operate during these hours, you get a permit. You check the boxes, you follow the recipe, you get to bake the cake. It's fast and it's cheap.
Okay, so what is the alternative if they lose the express lane?
The alternative is a case-by-case permit review.
Yeah.
That is the slow lane. That is the nightmare scenario for a business.
Why?
Because a case-by-case review opens the door to contested case hearings. This means that for every single plant you want to balloon, you might have to face a judge.
Oh.
Neighbors can intervene. Lawyers get involved. The process can drag on for months or even years.
And time is money?
Time is money, and uncertainty is poison to investment. If you don't know if you'll be allowed to open, you can't buy the land or hire the trucks.
Ah. So they are looking at the political climate. They see the 8th graders protesting. They see the frustration building. And they realize that if the industry is seen as totally unregulated or dangerous, the state might be forced to scrap the standard permit entirely.
Precisely. They are realizing that public outcry creates political risk. Andrew Pinkerton is essentially saying, we will accept tighter reviews based on science. We will accept losing the zombie permits. We will pay that cost as long as you keep the process efficient.
It's a strategic compromise. They're trading a little bit of freedom for stability.
They want to avoid regulatory chaos just as much as they want to pour concrete. They need to know that if they follow the rules, they can stay in business. If the rules are constantly under attack by lawsuits and protests, that's bad for the bottom line.
Speaking of lawsuits, this isn't happening in a vacuum, is it? The report mentions some legal drama involving Harris County that sets the stage for this.
Yes, and this is crucial context. Harris County recently secured a legal win against the TCEQ regarding grace periods for concrete plants.
Grace periods.
Basically, periods where plants were given leeway on compliance. The state was essentially saying, okay, you're breaking the rules, but we'll give you some time to fix it without penalty. The court struck that down.
That sounds like a pretty clear signal.
It is. It signals a broader trend. The courts, the legislature, and the public are all slowly tightening the leash. The days of the Wild West for concrete batch plants seem to be fading. The industry sees the writing on the wall. They know they have to adapt, or they will get regulated out of existence.
And it's worth circling back to who is telling us this story. Natalie Weber's reporting stands out because she's framing this not just as a policy update, but as a shift in power. When you have a reporter with her background, someone who has investigated police misconduct and structural failures, looking at environmental permits, it suggests that these aren't just paperwork issues, they are accountability issues.
Absolutely. When investigative journalists start looking at administrative codes, it usually means those codes have real-world consequences that have been overlooked for too long. She's treating the environment as a beat that requires the same scrutiny as the police department or city hall.
So let's zoom out and look at the big picture here. We started with a concrete truck on the highway. We traced it back to a plant that might be next to a middle school. And now we're looking at a future where those plants are checked every 8 years instead of every 10, and where they can't hide behind old permits.
It's a convergence. You have the health needs of the community represented by the students like Gavin and Esteban, and advocates like Genesis Granados. You have the operational needs of the industry represented by Taka, and you have the politicians trying to thread the needle.
And the fascinating thing is that, for once, everyone seems to have agreed on the text of the law, even if they have totally different motivations.
That's the rarity. The students want safety. The CEO wants a streamlined process. The senator wants progress. They all landed on SB 763 and SB 2351 as the vehicle. It's a Venn diagram where the overlap is actually getting something done.
But I guess the question remains, will it work?
That is the million-dollar question. Rules are only as good as their enforcement. A review every 8 years is great, but only if the reviewers are rigorous. If they just rubber stamp the paperwork, nothing changes. Killing zombie permits is great, but only if the new standards are actually tough enough to protect public health.
And that brings us to the provocative thought I want to leave our listeners with today. We talked about how the industry supported these laws to keep the standard permit system alive. They want predictability. They want the express lane.
Right. They made a calculation.
So here's what I'm wondering. Did the industry agree to these changes because they genuinely believe they can operate cleaner? Or did they agree to them as a firewall?
What do you mean?
I mean, did they accept a small increase in regulation to prevent a massive wave of regulation that would actually force them to move away from schools entirely? If the standard permit survives, that means plants can still pop up in neighborhoods as long as they check the boxes.
That is the strategic compromise question. Is this a victory for public health, or is it a savvy defensive maneuver by the concrete industry to lock in a system that still fundamentally allows them to operate near where people live?
Getting to a better place, as Senator Alvarado said. But is the right place? That's something to chew on the next time you see one of those mixers spinning in traffic.
And pay attention to where it turns off the highway. It might be closer to your backyard than you think.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Take care.
That's all for now. Thanks again for diving deep with us into Concrete Conversations. I'm your host, and this is a podcast hosted by Texas Slab Guys, the leading concrete solutions provider across Texas. We look forward to more concrete talk soon.